On the day my son turned 4, I found out he wasn't my biological child. Not my kid, as it turned out. He was my wife's son, and my cousin's, and that's how the circumstances unfolded. For 4 years, I lived in a fairy tale they had concocted for me, unaware of the true state of affairs. My name is Eric. I'm 34 years old, to be exact. Just a regular guy, like many others. I work as a manager at an electronics store. There's nothing glamorous about my life. My wife Rachel is a nurse, smart, cheerful, kind. I fell in love with her at first sight. It was love at first sight. We got married a year after we met. Everything happened very quickly, as if we were in a hurry. It seemed we were both afraid that happiness might slip away if we didn't grab it with both hands. That's how quickly our relationship developed. A year after the wedding, Rachel told me, "I'm pregnant." I froze in surprise and then burst out laughing. "Really?" She nodded. We hugged. I cried. She cried too, with happiness. From that moment on, everything I did for them, for my family, for her, my beloved wife, for the child we named Connor. When Connor was born, I was over the moon. Words can't describe it. I carried him in a sling, got up at night to feed him, changed diapers. When he first said daddy, I filmed it. I watched that video over and over. I couldn't get enough of it. He was my boy, my flesh and blood. I felt like a real father. No one could convince me otherwise. Life went on as usual. I worked. Rachel took shifts at the clinic. Sometimes she got tired, but she always tried her best. Every Friday, my cousin Caleb would come over. It was a tradition we had. He'd been my shadow since childhood. We were inseparable. Loud, charming, everyone loved him. He knew how to win people over. He knew how to talk, how to make people laugh. I was simpler and more modest than him, but I respected him. He was like a brother to me. He was family, a close and dear person. After Connor was born, Caleb started showing up more often. He seemed drawn to us like a magnet. "Gotta see my nephew," he'd say every time he came. "Look at those ears. He's your twin, man." And I'd laugh. It made me feel good to hear that, because I liked hearing it. I was proud of my son. Sometimes I'd come home from work and Caleb would already be there waiting for us. During moments of rest, he would indulge in playing with little Connor, lively conversing with Rachel, creating an atmosphere of warmth and coziness. It often happened that after copious drinks, he would find refuge on the couch, allowing himself to drift off into the arms of Morpheus. In those days, I didn't pay much attention to it because he was part of our family, a close and dear person. Rachel would jokingly remark that if we had a second husband, Caleb could very well pretend to enroll our second father, causing bursts of laughter. He would burst out laughing, infecting everyone around with his merriment. I laughed too, sharing the general feeling of joy and serenity. We all laughed, unaware of the storm that was brewing. The first warning sign came on the day I unexpectedly returned home an hour earlier than usual, disrupting the usual course of events. Connor was peacefully snoring, immersed in the realm of dreams. And then I saw Caleb by the stove, wearing my t-shirt, which seemed a bit strange to me. "Hey, buddy," he grinned. "Decided to help out a bit. Rachel's in the shower right now." I just nodded in response, trying not to betray my confusion. But something inside me seemed to snap, like fragile ice under my feet. That t-shirt was clean. I took it out of the closet, which only heightened my suspicion. I had never seen him wear my clothes before. It was uncharacteristic of him. At that moment, Rachel appeared with wet hair, wrapped in a robe, as if she had stepped out of an artist's canvas. "You're home early today," she said, slightly surprised by my appearance. "Yeah," I replied curtly, not wanting to go into explanations. "Dinner's almost ready," Caleb added, trying to diffuse the situation. I gave a strained smile, trying to convince myself and those around me that everything was fine, that there was no reason to worry. But something had already cracked inside me, like an old vase, ready to shatter into fragments. And yet I suppressed my suspicions, trying to convince myself otherwise. "Don't be an idiot. Don't start winding yourself up. Don't let your fantasies run wild. That's Caleb, your cousin, the man you've known your whole life. Rachel is your wife, the woman you love. You have a child, the meaning of your life. Everything's fine. Just forget about it." I went back to my usual activities, trying to live as before. But the feeling of anxiety and unease didn't leave me, like a nagging melody playing in my head. A couple of weeks later, at a family barbecue, one of Caleb's buddies named Tom looked at Connor and exclaimed, "Damn, Caleb, he's the spitting image of you. It's like you cloned yourself." Everyone around burst out laughing, finding it amusing. I laughed too, but my laughter sounded false, like the sound of broken glass. Rachel looked away, avoiding eye contact. Caleb remained silent, not uttering a word in response. I didn't ask anything, afraid of hearing the truth. But the thought, like a snake, crept into my mind and poisoned it with its venom. That night, I couldn't close my eyes, tossing and turning in bed. Connor, as always, snuggled up to me, like a little kitten seeking protection. I stared intently at his face, trying to find any similarities. Does he really look like me? Or am I just desperately trying to believe it in order to preserve the remnants of my peace of mind? I tried to let go of this thought, to throw it out of my head like unnecessary trash. But the next day, Rachel was acting strange again, distant, as if an invisible wall had grown between us. I casually remarked that Connor had my ears, hoping to hear confirmation. She hesitated, as if not knowing what to answer, and then said, "Well, maybe he doesn't look exactly like you, but it doesn't matter." These words crashed down on me like an ice-cold shower, piercing me to the depths of my soul. As you can imagine, such a revelation could not pass without leaving a trace. I pushed that thought away again, trying to convince myself otherwise. However, like a worm, doubt continued to gnaw at me from within, poisoning every moment. I found myself involuntarily comparing Connor's facial expressions with Caleb's expressions. It became a kind of obsession, haunting me everywhere. The way he laughed, the way he talked, it seemed that even some phrases were painfully familiar. That's when I made a firm decision. I had to get to the truth, no matter what it cost. If it's just my paranoia, great, I can live with that. However, if my suspicions turn out to be true, I have to know for sure. I couldn't even imagine that the truth would be so devastating. But I already felt it. Something had been rotting in my house for a long time, poisoning the atmosphere, and I could no longer pretend that I didn't feel that nauseating stench of lies. Sometimes the truth doesn't save. Unfortunately, in some cases, it only shatters you into small pieces, depriving you of your last strength. But living in illusion, it's like death, coming slowly and painfully with each new morning. I didn't make a scene with Rachel, didn't lash out with accusations at Caleb. Instead, I just started watching, trying not to miss a single detail. And suddenly, everything started to hurt acutely. The way Caleb held Connor, not like an uncle, rather like a father full of tenderness and care. Rachel's smile when Caleb joked. Their glances, which they exchanged at the table, full of hidden meaning. I could no longer not see it, as if a veil had fallen from my eyes. One night, I decided to dig into the old cloud archive. Back in the days when we had a shared phone account, Rachel had long since changed the password. However, the archive, fortunately, was preserved. And here they are, the photos. From 2018, Rachel and Caleb. At first, just selfies, innocent and harmless. Then, wine, romantic gatherings. Then, hugs, too tight and frank, on the couch. And then messages. Nothing explicit, but full of intimacy and innuendo. "You understand me like no one else." It's a shame that things turned out this way. He'll never notice anything. I broke into a cold sweat as if I were in the epicenter of a storm. My hands trembled, unable to hold the phone. The next day, I ordered a paternity test. No drama, only a quiet, all-consuming horror gripped me. I used my toothbrush. I used Connor's brush, trying to act discreetly. I sent the samples to the lab, and I started waiting, counting the hours and minutes. With each day, the tension in my stomach grew, as if a tight spring was tightening more and more. On the seventh day, the result came. I didn't immediately dare to open the envelope, as if delaying the inevitable. When I finally did, my vision seemed to blur, and the world around me ceased to exist. Probability of paternity, 0%. You are not the biological father. I reread it 3 times, as if hoping that the letters would change, as in a nightmare, and still couldn't believe it. It was like a punch in the gut that takes your breath away. My hands trembled like autumn leaves in the wind. My heart was pounding so loudly that it seemed the drum beat was tearing my chest apart from the inside. I sank to the floor as if cut down, unable to stand any longer. back against the wall, looking for some support in this collapsing world. Eyes closed, but even behind tightly closed eyelids, numbers and letters danced, forming one terrible sentence. Everything I believed in crumbled to dust. Everything I loved, everything I had built with such difficulty, turned out to be built on lies, like a house of cards, ready to collapse at the slightest breath of wind. And worst of all, the betrayal came from those I trusted most in the world, from those I considered my family. But I still didn't want to jump to conclusions, as if deep down there was a faint hope for a miracle. I needed another test, a final shot to dispel all doubts, this time with Caleb. It took days to figure out how to accomplish it, how to pull it off so that no one would suspect anything. Finally, one weekend when he stayed with us again, I stole his razor, carefully packed it in a bag, as if it were the most precious thing in the world, signed it as required, as if it were evidence in a complex case, sent it. The waiting almost killed me. Every hour dragged on like an eternity filled with anxiety and fear. But I already knew the truth. I felt it with every cell of my body. I just needed the final confirmation, that crushing blow that would prove I hadn't gone crazy. Day 5. The result. Match 99.97%. Biological father Caleb M. The phone fell from my hands like a hot coal. I collapsed to the floor as if I had been thrown from a great height, covered my face with my hands, trying to hide from the truth that had crashed down on me. It was confirmation, cruel and merciless. Confirmation that I had been raising my cousin's son, a stranger's child, putting my soul and heart into him. That my wife had been lying to my face day after day, year after year. That my brother had been looking me in the eye, playing with my son, eating dinner at my table, pretending to be friendly and supportive, all the while knowing the truth. I didn't scream, didn't tear my hair out, didn't punch the walls. I went numb as if I had been frozen. I felt like an empty shell, gutted from the inside, as if I had woken up inside someone else's life, in a nightmare I couldn't escape from. That evening, I watched Connor play. He was building a tower out of blocks, focused and engrossed. He laughed, clear and carefree. He knew nothing, suspected nothing about the storm raging in my heart. And all I could think about was, I still love you, even if you're not mine. You're not to blame. You're an innocent victim in this dirty game. You were born out of lies. You're the fruit of deception, but I'm the only father you've ever known. But I couldn't keep silent any longer. Couldn't live as if nothing had happened, as if this terrible truth wasn't tearing me apart from the inside. I had to know. Did they plan it together, conspiring behind my back? Or was it an accidental mistake that they buried, hoping I would never find out? The next night, when Connor was already sleeping peacefully in his crib, I asked Rachel to keep me company in the kitchen. I carefully placed 2 envelopes with the DNA test results on the table, as if they were some ominous pieces of evidence. She glanced at the envelopes and her face instantly lost color, as if all the blood had drained from her face. Rachel slowly sat down on the chair. Her movements were constrained and uncertain. She remained silent, unable to utter a word. "Do you want to say something?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm, but feeling everything inside me tighten with tension. The silence in the room seemed deafening, and every second stretched out unbearably long. After a painful pause that seemed to last an eternity, she whispered, "I didn't know how to tell you." Her voice was barely audible, like a breath of wind, and there was deep sadness and remorse in it. 4 years. 4 years, Rachel. You looked me in the eye and said, "You're the best dad." You lied to me without a trace of conscience. I couldn't hold back the bitterness and anger that were seething inside me. It it happened once, she mumbled in response, her eyes full of tears. I didn't know he was the father until Connor was born. But then I was afraid to lose you. He needed you, your love and care. I clenched my fists until my knuckles turned white, trying to calm the tremor in my body. Rage and pain overwhelmed me like boiling lava. Did Caleb know? I asked, although I already knew the answer. She looked away, unable to look me in the eye, and that was enough to understand the whole truth. He knew. He knew from the beginning. He knew and still came to visit us, smiled as if nothing had happened. watched me feed his child, and was silent, keeping his terrible secret. When trust collapses, when it shatters into small pieces that can no longer be glued together, it is not only the marriage that falls apart. Your personality collapses, your idea of yourself. You no longer understand who you really are, because everything you stood on turned out to be nothing more than quicksand. I was silent, unable to utter a word. Rachel sat motionless as if frozen, and stared at one point on the countertop. The clock in the kitchen continued to tick, counting the seconds, but inside me a deafening fire alarm was sounding. He knew, I repeated, like an echo. He knew everything, and you let me build a family on someone else's foundation. You let me hold him in my arms, love him, believe he was mine. She sobbed softly, her shoulders trembling with sobs. I didn't want to lose you. And you thought that hiding it wasn't the surest way to lose me. Maybe I could have forgiven you. Maybe we could have fixed everything and saved our marriage. But now you've destroyed everything, everything that was between us. She took a step towards me, reaching out her hands. Please, I love you. I stepped back as if from fire. That's not love, that's cowardice, and it's unforgivable. An hour later, I packed my things. I left without looking back. Didn't say goodbye to Connor. I couldn't. One look into his eyes, and I would shatter into thousands of pieces like fragile glass broken by a strong blow. I booked a cheap motel room just to hide from the world. Later, after a long search, I found a small one-room apartment, a modest refuge, just a place to come back to, where I could lick my wounds. The first few weeks were hell, an unbearable ordeal. I couldn't eat. The food seemed tasteless and alien. I didn't talk to anyone, as if I had lost my voice. I just sat, immersed in my thoughts, going over everything in my head again and again, trying to find answers. When did it all start? What moment was the starting point? What did I miss? What didn't I pay attention to? How could I have been so blind, not noticing the obvious? Every time I heard a child's laughter, something inside me would break, like an old bone. After all, Connor's laughter was constantly ringing in my memory, haunting me, not letting me rest. And I didn't even know if I had the right to call him my son because we had no blood relation. But my heart had been in his tiny hands all these years. He held it tightly and, I thought, carefully. One day, after some time, Caleb sent me a message, short, cold, without sincere remorse, only formal regret. I know I have no right to contact you, but if necessary, I'm ready to take responsibility. Sorry. I deleted his message, leaving no chance for dialogue. No answer. His ready to take responsibility sounded like an insult, like a mockery of my feelings. Ready? After 4 years, you're ready only when it's convenient for you. A month later, gathering the remnants of my strength, I contacted a lawyer. Filed for divorce. No shouting, no scandals, no mutual accusations. Just a period at the end of the sentence, the completion of a painful chapter. Rachel continued to write, trying to reach me. At first, she begged, asked for forgiveness, promising to fix everything. Then anger, rage, and resentment appeared in her messages. Then she begged again, hoping for a miracle. You love Connor, he's still yours. But I remained silent, as if numb with pain, because I no longer knew what belonged to me, what was left of my former life, and what was just meager scraps from someone else's table of lies, the bitter consequences of deception. 2 months passed, time dragged on painfully slowly, and then one day I received a letter, a child's drawing, clumsily drawn by a small hand, a stick figure, a bright sun, and a house, and crooked letters written with such effort. Dad, I miss you. Where are you? I'm waiting. Love, Connor. I cried. I just sat, holding this piece of paper filled with childish love and hope, and cried, unable to hold back the tears, because he wasn't to blame. He was just a child, an innocent victim of circumstances. He didn't choose his father. He was just unlucky. I wanted to rush to him, hug him tightly, hold him close, and say, I'm here, I'm close. But I was powerless. For if I decided to return, a bitter fate awaited me. I would once again find myself in a den of lies, where every word was nothing more than a carefully calculated falsehood. where smiles were no more than masks hiding true feelings or perhaps even malice, where I was just a convenient shadow, obediently replacing the real actors in this drama. It has been a whole year since I left that world of deception and pretense. Now I live alone, like a hermit lost in a noisy city. Work has become my refuge, my salvation from tormenting memories. Sometimes, giving into nostalgia, I look at old photos. In them, the three of us are still happy and carefree. And I can't believe that the person in the picture is me, naive and blind. Rachel, a kind soul, sometimes sends me messages full of sadness and hope. She writes that Connor, my son, constantly asks questions, trying to unravel the mystery of my disappearance. Why doesn't Dad come? He asks, not understanding the complexity of the situation. But I remain silent in response, unable to explain to him the truth that could break his little heart. For loving someone, it doesn't mean letting them destroy you, erase your personality into powder. Sometimes, paradoxically, love requires you to leave, to disappear from the lives of loved ones, to leave silently without unnecessary words and reproaches, to avoid inflicting even deeper wounds, to save at least something of myself, of my battered soul. Perhaps one day, when he grows up and becomes a wise and judicious man, I will reveal the truth to him, tell him everything as it really was. Maybe then he will understand me and forgive me for my long absence. Or maybe not. Who knows what awaits us in the future? But I know one thing for sure. I loved sincerely, from the bottom of my heart, asking nothing in return. And they, Rachel and Connor, played an important role in my life, leaving an indelible mark. But I will never again allow anyone to play with my heart, to trample on my feelings. Never.